Today, we're gonna talk about foie gras. What is foie gras? Foie gras is the fattened liver of ducks and geese. It's been around for thousands of years. ChefSteps has used it. I first started cooking with it in France like, a decade and a half, 2 decades ago. It's a really, really special ingredient. But for a long time, a lot of folks have felt it's not necessarily a very good ingredient or humane ingredient with how the animals are treated. And it's really, really, really expensive. So Matthew and I got to thinking, what if you could make a foie gras without any animals at all? Would that be impossible? What? Would that be faux gras? We're gonna show you how.
So I'm gonna show you how to make this. We're gonna run through everything, but there's 4 key things that you need to pay attention to. One is you need to soak the cashews, get them hydrated and nice and juicy. You need to precisely measure your ingredients, especially the hydrocolloids. You need a high-speed blender because it keeps everything very silky smooth. It creates friction, increases the temperature for the hydrocolloids to hydrate properly, and you need to have your mise en place set up. You need to have whatever you're gonna cast into ready to go.
Let's do it!
So to make this recipe a success, you have to soak the nuts. They have to get juicy and hydrate. Otherwise, you're gonna have to adjust the water amount in that recipe. And you're gonna see a difference here. This I just filled with water, and then these have been soaking overnight. So they get plump and juicy.
So these were 150 grams dry, and after soaking 220, so that's like 35% increase in weight and volume, which means they're just gonna be all smooth and buttery when you blend them, and not like grainy.
Yeah.
So we've got our ingredients here. What are the jobs to be done here?
Fat, that's the main thing, right? Foie, very rich and fatty. Cashews lend very well to being fatty, rich nuts. Take about a cup of cashews, and it's 150 grams, 1.5 grams of low acyl gellan. And we need 0.4 grams of high acyl gellan. They have different properties. In small amounts, they do their job. So we got our gellan gum there, 8 grams. Kosher salt, 1.5 grams. Black pepper, classic seasoning, right? We use salt and pepper for all kinds of things. And we've got our sweet spice here, 2.5 grams. Heavy on anise, there's some vanilla in there, some orange.
It's like classic winter spices from the spice trade, which you use in foie gras all the time.
Brandy or cognac, which is very classic in your pâtés and mousses. Tomato paste, 15 grams. Add that rosy color, and it adds a little bit of umami as well. All right, our miso, 25 grams. 275 grams water. I've already got that scaled out here. Coconut oil. We use a refined coconut oil because you don't want the coconut flavor to come through. You want it neutral. And this is a saturated fat that sets up well.
Saturated fat, like the same fat you get in foie gras.
And then the other fat I have here is what we're gonna use for the fat cap. This is an option, but it is a shortening made out of coconut oil and red palm oil. So, all right, we got most of our ingredients here. The last thing is some knife work. We're gonna do the mushrooms, the shallot, and the garlic.
Matthew's got all these little veggies and ingredients dialed in. We're gonna show you how to go from this to this, a faux gras pâté. I can't believe that's not foie gras.
So it's important to be organized, right? We've got our ingredients all scaled out. That's part of it. The other part is to have your blender set up, and you wanna have whatever you're gonna cast into. So these have been washed and dried. They're ready to go. Very important, because once it goes into the blender and blends and we hydrate the hydrocolloids and it gets up to the temperature it needs to, you gotta go right into here because it sets up right.
Yeah, otherwise you won't have this firm set texture. It'll be thinner and more fluid.
Right, maybe a little lumpy, just not as smooth and silky. Okay, so we've got all our ingredients measured out. Now it's time to cook the foie gras.
Let's make the impossible possible.
And what we're gonna do is sweat the vegetables with a little bit of the coconut oil that we have scaled out. I'm just gonna put a little bit of oil. The rest we'll add once we have the ingredients sweat down. Okay, so we got our oil in there. Sweating the vegetables, we don't want any color on them. I'm gonna put a lid on here to help out with trapping the moisture and help out with sweating. You don't wanna go too high on the heat, but you do want the onions or the shallots to soften, kind of start to turn translucent, and you want the mushrooms to wilt and cook. All right, so now we're gonna crank up the heat and we're gonna add the brandy.
Why are we gonna do the cook off by half again, just to get rid of a little bit of booze?
We're gonna get rid of a little bit of booze and we're gonna concentrate the flavor of that brandy. So it's reduced by half. Let's add the rest of our ingredients. We're gonna add the water. We need to bring everything to the boil. We're gonna add our nuts, coconut oil.
This doesn't look like it's gonna turn into this, but it's gonna.
Miso, tomato paste. We've got our salt, pepper, and our spices.
So this is the only ingredient we add in the blender, right?
Yes.
The hydrocolloid.
Yeah.
The reason why we don't dump our hydrocolloids in right now, it's about dispersing. So if you dump them in right now, you risk like clumps of a very precise ingredient, because this is a very, very fine grain. And if you put it in a blender, it's called dispersion. So you get really, really the best dispersion, as opposed to just like clumping it up. It's like throwing flour, like a handful of flour in boiling water. It's gonna turn into a big dumpling and raw on the inside too.
We need to bring it up to the boil and then we're going to the blender.
This is the last critical control point, right? We're gonna add our precisely measured hydrocolloids. Then you need to make sure it hydrates, which is boiling in the blender. And then you gotta go immediately to the jar, right?
Yeah. So we've got our jar set up. We've got our boiling liquid. We're gonna go blend it.
So here's the thing, if you put hot boiling stuff in here and blend it, boom, it can like build up a lot of pressure. So you need like a little vent.
Also too, depending on what kind of high-speed blender you have, make sure it's on low speed before you start. Hot liquid into the blender. Put the lid on or a towel over that. You're gonna start out low speed. We're gonna drop in our hydrocolloids. We're gonna let it go until it boils. We're gonna notice a key tone change and you'll see it start to bubble.
See it like, pop, see it starting to pop, 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 just like boiling.
So I'm gonna give it a little stir on the top to keep it from setting, but we're gonna go right into our jars. There we go, give it a little shake and a tap. So that's it, you gotta work very fast to get it into the jar.
Yeah, that Delan sets up quick.
Now we're adding the fat cap.
See the yellow fat on top? That's a hallmark of like foie terrine. Also, I'd say you just wanna melt it. You don't wanna fry it, you don't wanna get it hot, you don't wanna like put it on and fry it, you're just barely melting it.
Yeah, just a low heat. And then we're just gonna spoon some of this on top of the jars. Just looking to cover. This seals it in, keeps the oxygen away from it, the top. That's it. So from here, just go right into the fridge. Leave the top open so it can cool down. As soon as that fat cap hardens, then you can pull it out, temper it a little bit, soften the fat cap, and get right to enjoying it.
This is like my classic way to do it. Little bit of the foie. Little slash a lot, maybe even more. And I got a sweet tooth with my like holiday foie situation, so I like a little bit of jam. I could eat like 100 of these. That's our impossible, our foie gras. Get the full recipe at ChefSteps, all sorts of other techniques. And if you really want to learn more about actual foie gras, we have the original, the old school, the traditional, but like done really well. Recipe for this, made from foie gras. I don't know if I'd ever go back to it. It depends who my audience was. But this is just freaking amazing. I'm just like so in love with this recipe now. That's it. It's foiable. God, that's good. It's good, huh? Yes!